Hello, and welcome to the Legend of Podcast, Trails Through Trails, where we blaze a trail through this trail and try to pun on it as much as we can. I'm the first of your hosts, Lex, and I use she, her pronouns.
And I'm Matt, also known as Ponk on the internet, and I use he, him pronouns. Hello, why are we here? What's going on? I just woke up. What happened?
Yeah, that time difference, man, that's pretty wild. Well, we are here to play Trails. Trails in the Sky, first chapter, but hopefully we're going to get through the entire Trails series. And that's not the Tales of series, which some people think it is. That's also a JRPG series, so I understand the confusion, but no, this is a Trails series. Legend of Heroes, Trails.
And there are so many of them, and isn't that a wonderful thing to have?
It's true. It's the longest running JRPG series I know of that actually tells a sequential story, as opposed to something like a Final Fantasy, where occasionally there's spin-off sequel games, but they're all set in different worlds in terms of the mainline entries.
Yeah, absolutely. A really difficult thing to tell apart Trails and Tales, because Trails does one consistent story with characters with blue hair, and Tales does a bunch of different stories with characters with blue hair.
It used to at least be easier because you could say, well, one is turn-based and the other is more action, but now Trails is kind of going to the action line, so it's harder to say. But we are planning to play through every game, starting at the beginning. Hopefully you'll be along for the ride.
So, we thought for the first episode, rather than immediately diving feet first into the first game, we do a bit of an overview of the series as a whole, the setting, the history of it in and out of game. So, with that, I just have one question for you, Lex. What is a Trails?
What is a Trails? To trail or not to Trails, that is the question. Or not. Trails is a series by the developer Neon Falcom. It's a sub-series of The Legend of Heroes, but The Legend of Heroes is a broader title that's been used for other RPGs that Falcom has made, whereas Trails is the series that actually tells a continuous story. It started in 2004 with Trails in the Sky first chapter, which I believe was originally on Windows, then on PSP, then ported to Vita, and a whole lot of places. There's a whole saga, a whole trail in itself of where Trails in the Sky has been. But it starts there, and it goes on until present day, and we still don't know when it's going to end.
And I don't think they do either. Look, there's a lot of interesting analogies because all different JRPGs, hopefully no one hates the term, follow similar histories. So Trails is a spin-off of Legend of Heroes in the same way that Persona is a spin-off of Shin Megami Tensei.
That's a
and
great
it has
analogy.
a story that nobody knows the end of, just like Kingdom Hearts.
Fun note about the term JRPG. Kondo, the president of Falcom, has said that he loves the term JRPG because he thinks it makes him proud as a Japanese man to be part of a tradition of Japanese-specific storytelling. So at least when it comes to Trails, JRPG is the endorsed term by the creators.
Nice. I didn't actually know that. It's nice to see the term being reclaimed from kind of the pejorative way it was used in the 90s and 2000s. A trend I never understood as a Final Fantasy sicko myself.
Oh, yeah.
We've reclaimed the phrase, so it's a proud JRPG. And what a J-ish RPG it sure is.
Oh, yeah. Starting with the fact that just getting them out of Japanese and into English is a fucking ordeal. The localization story behind these games are, well, we might get into that. Suffice to say, they are extremely wordy games, so they take a lot to translate. And given that it's a small company and localization teams have also been small, it has taken eons for some of these games to actually make it overseas.
Truly. I first learned about the Trail series myself from, I think, the story we're both talking about here, Jason Schreier's coverage of the translation of Trails in the Sky, which we'll link in the show notes, but be forewarned, it's a very heavy story.
Yeah.
It took a lot out of the people translating it. Let's just leave it at that. But it's a very interesting insight from a person who truly loves the series to begin with and wanted to sort of give the behind the scenes the credit it's due. Mm-hmm. These games are a lot of work to translate. It's a minor miracle that they've all made it over here at this point.
Yeah. And a minor miracle that we're almost caught up. I mean, there's only one game out in Japan that has not been localized here right now, which is really, really miraculous. Very exciting.
And I believe that the remake of Trails in the Sky First Chapter, which is coming out this year, is actually getting a simultaneous worldwide release. So
Well, wonders never cease. Yeah.
we might be a parody moving forwards. It truly is a new age.
Yeah. All right, so that is what a trail is, Matt.
Thank you. I understand now. This was a really short podcast.
That's it. We've trailed through the trails.
Thank you for listening to the entire series. No, let's maybe dive just a tiny bit deeper. So, can I ask you some questions as though I've never heard of this series before?
Please do. I love nothing more than answering esoteric questions about long-running JRPG series.
Excellent, because I've got some real dumb ones for you. My first question, Trails, what world are this?
Well, Trails takes place in a galaxy far, far away. No, it takes place in a continent called Zemuria. It is one continent. Far as we know, there's maybe some islands around it, but there's no other continents that are in the mix. So I guess we don't necessarily know the scale of the continent compared to like a planet. Maybe it's a Pangea type situation. But it's called Zemuria. Each arc within the series takes place in a different country or kingdom or city-state within that continent. And the first arc, the first game in the series, take place in Liberl, which is the liberal kingdom. And yes, we will be joking about that name probably a lot. But it takes place in the kingdom of Liberl.
Love it. Does what it says on the tin. Mm-hmm. So the interesting thing with Trails is, although it's a very long-running series with a very long-running continuous story, it's also broken up into these country location-specific arcs, which means there are a lot of jumping on points.
There are.
Which is really exciting because up to and including now, availability of some of the titles is pretty limited, like Trails in the Sky. If you have a PSP, you can play it there. Congratulations. Or PC. That's about it right now. It's conspicuously not been ported to other consoles in the way a lot of the other titles are. The more recent Cold Steel series has at least partially made it onto the Switch. The Crossbell arc from back in also the PSP or the PS Vita days, depending on the version.
I can't remember if it's PSP or Vita that it first came out, but it was back there. It was wild.
Yeah, sort of an era, but that has now been localized, but that first series of games is still an absolute mystery to many. So it's lucky to know that you can sort of jump on at any point, as I personally did. So Liberl is our first stop in the world. We're sort of starting from a point where we only generally know kind of the shape of the world around us.
Yeah.
The game's really piecemeal about handing out that world map, maybe because they're still drawing it in real time.
Yeah, either that or there's going to be some real big spoilers the second you see what the eastern end of the continent looks like, because we still have no clue.
It is kind of mystifying. I came in at Cold Steel where we were 3 arcs in, and I still sort of looked at the map and went, huh? What?
Yeah. What's interesting is that Liberl, it's not in the center of the continent, but it's kind of more central. And at first, we travel further west. So we're going to go from Liberl to Crossbell, which is a city-state that's a little further west than Liberl, or at least north, and I think a bit west of Liberl. And then we're going to go all the way to the furthest western part, the Empire of Erebonia, and then we're going to start traveling east. So it's interesting that they started around the middle-ish. Hey guys, Lex from the future here. I'm just popping in to say that that is not correct. I don't know what my brain was doing when I recorded that last night, but Liberl is not in the center of Zemuria. It's the southwestern tip. It's south of Erebonia, and it's not east of Crossbell. It's west of Crossbell. Just chalk up what I said here to first episode nerves and jitters and brain fart due to that. Anyway, back to the episode. And then now we're only almost a dozen games in. Now they're like, let's start to nudge our way over to the east. We're still only in the center of the continent. We're a little further east than Liberl now and in Calvert in the latest games, but we still haven't gone past the center point, really, of the continent. There's a lot of mystery there.
Yeah, it is kind of wild to see these maps where there's just kind of very defined, very precise geographical mapping of this beautiful coast of Erebonia, and then just kind of a smudgy hand wave watercolor on the side saying, this is probably the east.
Yeah, it kind of reminds me of Final Fantasy XIV's world map, how, I don't know if you've played actually, but it basically started out with most of the world map clouded, and with each expansion, when you get to a new place, they kind of unshrouded that area of the map, and now, I mean, there's a lot, but it's not completely, I don't think it's completely uncovered yet, but it's a fun comparison because that's also the only other example I can think of a continuous story that's been being told for a comparable length of time. Not quite as long. I mean, Final Fantasy XIV is, 2011 or 2014 or early 2010s as opposed to 2004, but it still takes place over that long and has that kind of institutional memory of characters coming back and of the politics really being mapped out, pun not intended, over such a long period of time and storytelling. And similarly, I like to think that Final Fantasy XIV is really the story of the world it's in, and Trails is also more than it's the story of any particular character or cast of characters, it's the story of this continent.
Yeah, because definitely, while the events might take place in one country, they absolutely have a knock-on effect to every other country. And after a handful of games, it gets really wild hearing people talk about the events of the world, just saying, oh yeah, you know, when that giant pillar of salt happened, and then also there were those evil flowers, and then there was that alien spaceship that kidnapped all of the left-handed people, and then we had an earthquake that made a new city come up, and then Atlantis left for a while.
And then everyone just started living upside down.
Yeah.
Pretty much.
And then this week we invented the stock market.
And if you want to know how many of those things really happen, stay tuned.
Because they're all as likely as each other.
You won't know till you get there. And even then, who knows? Maybe we just predicted the end of the not the end of the show, the end of the series.
Truly, I look at the series sometimes, I'm like, how much did they know about what these things happen? Or do they just kind of draw a mark in the sand and say, this is a thing that happened and we'll cover it when we're ready?
I imagine that there are things they've known since the beginning, but the journey of how they get there and how they're gonna go between those points has been some of it, they're probably little things that they're like, we can't wait to introduce this character or this location, but I think a lot of it is, which is also, I mean, a part of good storytelling is to be adaptable, so this isn't a knock on the series storytelling that they didn't know everything right from the beginning, but I think it's a mix of, you know, they might have known certain, like the mythos of the world, how it was created, and is the goddess really real, and this kind of stuff from the beginning, but I think a lot of it, I think it's a mix, but maybe one day we'll get a Teoh interview.
Okay, so we know a bit about what the world looks like, both literally and kind of knowledge-wise. How long has the story of this game been going for?
So in our world, this has been going on since 2004. So what's that? 21 years. But yeah, it's been going on for a really long time. In universe, it's been, I think, 5 to 7 years within the story of the games. Less than 10 for sure. But it's been yeah. We're in, what, nearing the year 1210 in the games, I think. And it starts like 1205, 1204, something like that.
That's crazy. That's so
They're really
insane.
busy in Zemuria.
Knowing even a snippet of what's been happening in this dang place, it's insane that anyone would continue to live there. No wonder they're trying to go to space in the new game. It's the only safe place left.
Spoilers. Yeah, I mean, they do have time as one of the elements they can use magic of, so maybe that's the reason so much has been able to happen in, 21 years of games has happened in 5 years or so.
And the way that world has changed in 5 years' time, truly astounding. We will get there. There's going to be a lot of saying we will get there, but wow.
Yeah, technology in this world is so fascinating. People often call it a medieval fantasy, and it's definitely not. But it has also changed in terms of like what era of technology it's at dramatically from the first game to now.
Yeah, definitely the technology in the game world is moving at the speed of our world, but it just means that one week someone will invent the radio and the next week someone will invent television, and then it's just such a rapid expansion and everyone just kind of accepts it.
And then you've got an iPhone.
And then you've got an iPhone that lets you cast fire.
But at least it's a flip phone. They got that right.
It takes me straight back to my Motorola Razr days because it very much
Yes.
looks like a Motorola Razr.
Yes, it really does. It's like, Trails and Nomura games love the flip phone. I always think of that one shot from Crisis Core of Sephiroth holding a flip phone, and it's like you gotta think that like that is just the essence of Trails. They're like, how many people can we give flip phones to?
Man, I love these games.
Me too.
Moving on, the Legend of Heroes title has stuck onto the series to this day, but does it actually have any connection to the Legend of Heroes games that came before? Because I don't know, actually.
No, not in terms of the story. Yes, in terms of, as developers, there's a lineage of, mechanically and learning from creating a game and taking those lessons out of the next game. The Legend of Heroes series started in 1989 with a game called Dragon Slayer. And that game, I think, actually did come to the West and get localized into English. But the rest of the Legend of Heroes games did not until Trails in the Sky. And there were, I think, 5 Legend of Heroes titled games before they got to Trails in the Sky. There's another trilogy in there called the Gargav, I can't pronounce it, Garghav, Garhav, like, I don't know, trilogy. And I've heard people say that you can see some of the, like, ideas and inspirations that went into the Trails series first kind of iterated on there, but they're absolutely not connected in terms of story the way that all the Trails games are. So if you're looking at the list of Legend of Heroes games going, oh my god, I have to play 6 games before I get to this podcast, no, I have not played any of the other Legend of Heroes games, and unless they throw a real curveball at us, you're not ever going to have to know what happens in those games to play the Trails games. There's enough games here without adding those on. So they are other RPGs made by Nihon Falcom previous to the Trails series. And, the Trails series learned from them and builds on them, but not from a narrative perspective.
I admit I would be interested to go back and at least try some of these old games if there's a reasonable way to access them, if someone's done the work to translate them into English for me, because I am a poor fool who does not speak Japanese.
Same here. I would like to check out the Gargav trilogy one day.
Yeah. I was actually briefly Googling the series mostly I was curious to see, because I know the games date back to 1989 was the very first release. I wanted to know what they looked like, if there was any kind of similarity. And immediately the best screenshot ever came up, which was just a combat shot with some lovely portraits of everyone who involved in the Gargav story. And the caption of someone getting hit was Mnnga, which of course is spelled MNNG exclamation mark. I can make the noise, I just don't think I've ever done it before, especially in reaction to anything.
I wonder where you have to get hit for that to be what comes out of your mouth.
True. Maybe there's like a targeting system involved in these older games that's just gone by the wayside, so you have to hit the Mnnga spot. That sounds awful. I don't ever want to say Mnnga spot again. That's a horrible thing. I don't like it.
The Mnnga spot.
Oh. That just hit me deep.
I'm going to have to spring that on you when you're least expecting it.
I don't like that I've given you or anyone listening to this ammunition. Don't let this be my banana crunch. Okay, so we don't have to worry about the old Legend of Heroes stories in any capacity, which is fantastic because we've got enough story to worry about. What is the base knowledge we should know going into a Trails game? Like, what is useful to know to start your Trails experience?
You say a Trails game, and the answer is that super depends on which Trails game you're starting with. As we said before, you can, while it's recommended to start with Trails in the Sky first chapter, you can technically start at the beginning of any of the arcs, but if the number 2 or 3 or 4 is in the title, you probably don't want to start with it. And some of them, like Trails into Reverie or Trails to Azure, don't have a number in the title, but are definitely not the first in their little series. So obviously, the later into the series you get, the more knowledge the series expects you to have, but they do some level of onboarding in each of those. So you can you can start, and then you'll get to the second or third game in the series, and they'll be like, and we assume you know who all these people are. And you can kind of figure it out. The one thing I will say is never ever Google any character, any location, basically anything except maybe where you can play the game. That's usually safe, but don't Google facts. Don't Google characters, because you're going to be like, who is Bob? And they're going to be like, the ancient demon lord from 3,000 years ago who emerged from his mother's womb and swallowed the sky. Like, I don't know. Like,
and then continued to work at the item shop in your first city until it is revealed. Yeah, it's very easy to get very spoiled about this series because it is such an ongoing narrative, and characters, even NPCs, carry from one game to the next, to the next, to the next. You're much better off, if you have any questions about this series ever, just ask someone who's already played, because that way you'll get the information you need and not everything that's going to happen for the next 6 games.
Yeah. Everyone I know has, like, spoiled themselves on at least one thing they wish they hadn't by Googling. Some people, it's been something minor. They're like, oh, I guess, would have been cool to learn that in the story, but it's fine that I learn it now. And sometimes, like, oh, that's the thing I was most curious about, and now all these big plot twists have been ruined for me. So just play it safe. But what you need to know going into the first game is that you're in for a long haul. This is a slow burn. But if you make it probably through chapter 2, you're probably going to finish the game. And if you finish the game, you're going to play all of them. So, get prepared. Now, in terms of knowledge about the world and the story, Trails in the Sky FC. FC stands for first chapter. I don't think I've actually said that yet on the podcast. But the first chapter doesn't really assume that you have any knowledge, so it will introduce all the topics to you. But for a little background, this takes place in a world that had kind of its own version of an industrial revolution, but magical, like 50 years ago. So technology has been expanding at a rapid pace. They have some pretty cool devices that we don't have, including a system called Orbaments, which is like materia from Final Fantasy VII, but it's not called materia, so don't call it that, or else Square Enix will, come to your house.
Legally distinct materia.
Legally distinct materia called Orbaments that use quartz as a materia. Not materia. Those are what you use to, shoot fire from your pocket watch and eventually shoot fire from your cell phone. There's a weirdly uneven level of technology, partially because the technology in this world has developed so rapidly, partially because it's a video game. And so they have airships, but they want to make sure you walk between all the cities on foot. Yep. So no one's invented public transportation. But they can definitely fly. So you kind of have to take that as it comes. And you've got a weird level of, guns do exist, but you can also fight somebody with a gun with your big stick. And as long as you have the same level or higher level, you're going to be equally skilled. There is some kind of mumbo jumbo about how the orbment quartz systems also enhance your physical abilities, but we just kind of have to take them at their word at that, because I don't understand how that's supposed to work, but who does? But that's also par for the course for JRPGs, right? How Cloud Strife is able to how he's able to lift that sword, first of all, let alone how he's able to use it to, fight a giant robot, what are they called, ultimate weapon thing. Nobody knows. Nobody needs to know, because it's cool. And that's kind of, with some things, why can Estelle beat things with a giant stick when they're shooting actual, live ammunition at her? Because it's cool. Go with it.
In a world where just a big guy lives in the ocean and is ready to come fight, you kind of have to accept that rock from ground make you punch good.
Yeah, as it should. Now, other things you need to know, you're going to hear the word bracer, and that's going to be explained in the game, but if the first time you see it, you're like, what the fuck is that? I can't cope with this. What is that word? Should I Google it? Again, never Google anything. Bracers are a guild that our main characters in this game are hoping to join and are trading to join. And they're kind of like a mix of community watch and NGO. And I was going to say community police, but there's some implications there that aren't carried by the bracers. They are trained in combat. They have to have a certain level of combat proficiency to be bracers. If you can't fight, but you want to work with them, you have to be their receptionist. They are an international organization. There are some rules related to, they can't interfere in politics, and that's why all these countries let them operate there. And their ultimate, guiding principle is to defend civilians, which is also the only time that they can intervene in politics is if the government is attacking its civilians. Then you can jump in, but short of that, you can't really. And yes, we're aware that civilians can be harmed by things other than the government, actively throwing bombs at them. But the game's aware of that too, and it's going to interact with that. So just hold your breath if you're trying to jump in with that criticism. We're aware, they are too, and they'll engage with that. It'll be fun. And we'll talk about it in more depth when we get to that. But those are kind of the basic facts going in. You're going to have an excellent protagonist and follow her journey to try and become a fully fledged bracer.
And honestly, I was delighted when I first started looking into Sky and realized that Estelle was the main character, not Joshua. Because, let's be real, like, a JRPG with a female protagonist who's treated respectfully and allowed to remain fully clothed, not common.
Yeah.
So it's really nice to just have, like, I've only played like an hour or two of Sky, but I feel confident in saying an absolute goober as the protagonist.
Yeah, Estelle is the greatest. She's like one of the greatest protagonists ever. I honestly think that. She's so well written. She's so fun. She's so charming. She's just sunshine. They named her Bright for a reason. It's really on the nose, but it's true. And she's so delightful. And look, obviously, this is a game from 2004. There's going to be some moments where we go, that was 2004. And that's not to say that these games have always have not sometimes stayed in the 2004 era in certain regards when it comes to treatment of certain characters, but they have gotten better in some ways, and we'll talk about that as we go. Estella's a really magnificent character, and
yeah, as a leaping off point for an entire series, she's a great start.
Oh yeah.
Just she's got personality immediately, very sort of relatable, lovable, just says the weirdest shit constantly.
She's so funny.
She talks like her dad, I'm immediately seeing.
Two biggest goobers.
A whole family of them. But that might be jumping a little far ahead. Now that we sort of know the basics of what you need to know jumping into this series, should we talk about how we jumped into this series?
Let's.
Well, Lex, how did you become a Trails sicko?
Well, how didn't I become a Trails sicko? It was kind of inevitable. Anyone who knows me probably could have expected that I would have become one at some point. But it didn't actually happen for me until COVID. I was quite sick with COVID. I had a bad case of long COVID, which meant I had to just lie on a couch all day, every day for a while. There's not much you can do when lying on a couch all day, except either like watch TV or play video games on a TV or watch movies on a TV. You get the gist of it. And I preferred the playing video games thing. I had recently gotten into the Persona series and wanted some more character-heavy JRPGs that were turn-based combat, that had like a bit of a social sim aspect, and I heard about Trails of Cold Steel, and I didn't know at the time that it was part of a longer series. I just heard people being like, it's set at a school, it's kind of got some Persona vibes, you'll really like it, and you like Final Fantasy VII, and it's got materia that's not called materia, so you might enjoy that too. So I said, okay. It was on sale. It's on sale a lot. And I played it on my PlayStation 4, and I fell in love with it. It is not Persona-like, but it has things in common with Persona. That one is set at a school. They love schools and Trails, and we'll get into that when we see some of them. But I just, like, inhaled them. I got Cold Steel 2 installed before I finished Cold Steel 1. And Cold Steel is the longest of the sub-series. There's 4 of them. And when I was playing, I think this was early 2021, all 4 of those were out. And so I really just kind of sat there and inhaled them. And then I replayed 3 and 4 basically immediately because I loved them and I loved all 4, but there's a bit of a technological boost between 2 and 3. And it was a little hard to go back to the UI of 1 and 2 after having just done 3 and 4. I didn't quite want to replay all 4 in a row. That was a little much. And then I became such a Trails sicko that I got a PC so that I could play Trails in the Sky, because I was a Mac person before that. And to be fair, I actually did need a new computer at the time. And there were some other games I was like, it'd be nice to be able to play them. Trails in the Sky will run on a potato, but not if it's a Mac potato. There might be some ways around that, but that's not going to be discussed in detail right here, right now. it needed to be on a PC, so I got myself a PC and I played all of those.
Dedication.
And then I played the Crossbow games, which did not have a localization yet, but you could get them on Steam in Japanese, and there was a really excellent localization in the works when I was playing Cold Steel, a fan localization by Team Geofront, and it was released, and I was excited for that, and I installed that and played them, and then shortly afterwards, it was taken down, and everyone was like, why is it taken down? And then it came out that Falcom had bought that script from these translators and had also hired, I don't know if it was all of them, but the people in charge of that fan translation to work on adapting. They had like upgraded versions of those two games that had like, some more character cameos and some more quality of life stuff, whatever, to work on getting all that stuff also into the localization. Those, when they came out on all platforms, and I played them again, and they're excellent. It's one of the best fan translations I've ever seen. By then, I'd played all the games that were available in English. Had to sit and wait for more games to come out in English, and then they did, and I played them. And here I am doing a podcast because Kai no Kiseki hasn't had a localization released yet, and I need some way to cope. So here we are.
Well, ironically, our introductions to the series are going to have a lot of overlap.
Yes, so Matt, how did you get into Trails? How did you become a Trails sicko?
Well, this thing called COVID happened.
What? I haven't heard that one before.
Right. For us here in Melbourne, Australia, we had the longest continuous and sort of total overall lockdowns worldwide. I'm pretty sure we still hold that record. We were locked up in our houses for about 300 days over the course of a year and a bit.
Oh my God.
Yeah, it was wild. So during that period, for my gaming background, I'm big RPG head. I came up through Final Fantasy from sort of 7 onwards. Got into the Tales of series as well, which I've played a decent chunk of. Persona, Shin Megami Tensei, you name it. I've probably, at the very least, bought it, if not played it. But
R.I.P. Matt's backlog.
Right. I'd never touched the Trails series. I knew about it through that article we mentioned earlier from Jason Schreier, but at the time, I was also a MacBook-only person, and the games are just not available there. And I think I do have a PSP Go, so I tried playing it on there, but it was very old feeling, and I wasn't feeling the old RPG vibe at the time, so I kind of left it. But COVID came along, I needed something to do with my time, and like you said, Cold Steel was on sale. It was accessible on PlayStation, so I went for that one. I also bought and installed Cold Steel 2 before I'd finished playing Cold Steel 1.
And thank God we did, because, spoiler alert, there's a cliffhanger.
Yeah, goddamn. But I started during 2020, so I went through all of 1, all of 2 continuously. I got to the end-ish of 3 before I really burnt out, because
Talk about a cliffhanger.
in the madness of COVID, I'd gotten it in my head that I needed to finish these games in time for Cold Steel 4 to come out, which was like late October in 2020, was when it came to PS4. I think I managed it. I was able to sort of jump into it straight away, pretty much, which is a wild number of RPG hours to log in a single year. My partner could not stand the games because everyone was always saying something about everything that was happening, and just have him wander through and say, is this the Trails of the Legend of the Steel that's cold? Yeah, it's that one. It's Talkie Game. But yeah, I burned through all of those in succession. I played the Crossbell games when that fan translation did become the official translation. A very exciting story as well.
Which it's just so cool that happened.
To have a fan translation not just shut down, but for them to realize the value of it. Because, for backstory, Crossbell, Trails from Zero and Trails to Azure, because I always get them wrong.
You got it.
They were never released, and the argument was always, oh, it's such a big script, it's a big job, because I think they even outstripped the Sky games in terms of script length.
It was also the fact that they were so far behind Japan at this point that the Cold Steel games were more recent, and they thought, I think the idea was, at that point, I think there were like 2 Cold Steel games out in Japan, and they had just finished the 3rd Sky game in English, and they were like, if we're gonna be able to get a Western audience in any capacity, we should probably go straight to Cold Steel, because at least then it won't be a decade behind. I think that was the main reason, but also part of it was because the crossbow scripts were gigantic, and it was, it would be a setback and a half, let's say, on top of you already being really behind.
But absolutely delightful to have the games come out in English everywhere, to have this very well done script, to have the translators credited in the credits. That's amazing.
Take notes, other devs.
Clearly they saw how much buzz there was around this Geofront fan patch, and were like, oh, people are really hungry for this game. Maybe we should. And it worked out fantastically for everyone. Hooray. So I played through From Zero and a little bit of Azure. Again, I felt the need to rush through Zero to be ready to play Azure when it came out. I don't know why I need to do this. It's truly not a requirement at all to anyone. Then I did Reverie, which is sort of the Avengers collective game at the end of the Crossbell games and the Cold Steel games.
Yeah, that's the one you don't want to start with. If there's one you don't want to start with, it's Reverie. Reverie's amazing. Do not start with it.
That's one where they don't really bother to set the scene. They're just like, you know this stuff, right?
Yeah.
Which I didn't, because I hadn't finished Crossbell at that point and still haven't. So I sort of got an idea of what was going on. Then Daybreak I've played more recently from the most recent Calvard arc. And now it's finally time to circle back and see where it all began.
Long, long ago, on a continent far, far away. I didn't mean to make Star Wars references coming into this. That wasn't the plan. It just keeps coming out.
Is this a stealth Star Wars podcast? Is that what's happening to me?
Oh, God. Pin in that.
No, I think we're too minority to be Star Wars people.
I was a huge Star Wars fan growing up. But I'm also happy with not diving into all the expanded material at this point.
This is a long enough podcast ahead of us already. Let's not even look in that direction. Jesus.
No. Maybe when we're in a retirement home and we need something to do. But then we'll probably still be playing Trails. So.
Yeah, they'll be onto the second arc of the story by that point.
Finally, the second arc. Do you have any more questions, my friend?
Ooh, questions. Here's a good one that I think a lot of RPG fans like me might ask. How much cringe should I expect?
You know, a wise man once said, don't kill the part of you that's cringe, kill the part of you that cringes. And that's a good attitude to go into these games. Now, to be fair, there's a difference between what's cringe and what's upsetting or unsettling because of how it reflects on certain genders, certain minorities, that kind of thing. And there are definitely there's definitely some of the same type of jokes that you're going to find in, 90s and 2000s JRPGs, and not just JRPGs, in a lot of media regarding, gay characters. There's definitely some ladies whose boobs should actually, have their backs broken and not work. And there's definitely some sexual slapstick humor that goes over really well with some audiences, but you and I are not that type of person. So there's definitely some of that. Some of it is stuff that you can, look at and say, it's 2004. Some of it is stuff that you're like, ugh, I don't care that it's 2004. All of that said, the good outweighs the bad, I think, in a big way. Now, there is definitely some earnestness that some people find over the top. The same, power of friendship type of thing.
I was going to say, we need to sing with the power of our hearts, like that kind of energy.
Yeah, and they are going to do a lot of let's test your resolve in battle, which, now, I don't have the cultural context to know if that's, I know that happens a lot in Japanese media. I don't know if there's a cultural context behind it, so I'm not trying to dismiss that. But to us, it's a bit like, why am I testing your resolve for the fate of the world? Shouldn't we all be on the same page here?
It's a lot of, before we can have a conversation, I need you to prove that you can beat my ass.
But it's always possible you'll beat their ass and then the cutscene will reveal you didn't beat their ass. That was just a test. But at least you got a cool fight out of it. At least something to break up the cutscenes. I say this with love. I love cutscenes and I love battles in Cold Steel. And not just Cold Steel, I love Trails. Wow. That was a slip and a half.
Calling out the
that
rest
was bad.
of the franchise.
People are going to get fucking mad at me for that. Jeez.
Yeah, I will say I ask about the cringe thing because for me, my personal metrics, like I love Japanese games. I've played them, like I said, for years and years and years and years. But there are some stuff that I am tired of that I don't gel with, like the hypersexualization exclusively
Yeah.
of women, the physics creating breasts, because it's always you always start at like an F cup and there's nowhere to go but out.
Kickstarter for Risha Mao's reduction
Oh God,
surgery ASAP.
that needs to be a plot point. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's the Bleach problem of like if Orihime as a school kid has Blembos that big, then where do you go from there? It's like that stuff, it doesn't do anything for me, obviously.
Look, I'm a lesbian and it doesn't do anything for me either. Sorry, but I like girls with big boobs. I also like those boobs to look like boobs and not giant water balloons.
Yeah, that is a problem as well. Although, honestly, happy to not have physics working there. Very happy.
Yeah.
It's just like the overt sexualization of underage people. Again, it's
Yes.
usually just girls. The teacher-student relationship, which I understand is a Japanese trope, I don't like it.
No.
Poor representation of queer people or of other races. Luckily, the race thing doesn't come up as much. It's very rare, but when it hits bad. And it's just kind of those cringe points. It's like, I don't need that to carry me through a
Yeah.
story because there's so much story. You don't need those things waving in the air just to keep me focused.
I get what you mean. Now, I don't even group that, to me, I don't group that as cringe. I group that as disappointing. I'm not cringing, I'm just disappointed in you. Yeah, there's definitely stuff like that I totally get are going to be, breaking points for some people. That's totally fair. Everyone has their own litmus for things.
Yeah.
I will say some of it, at least the treatment of queer people, the Daybreak games, I think seem to be making an active effort with on a few points
Absolutely.
with a few different characters, both major characters and side characters and like side quests to be more inclusive. And there was a great article, we'll link it in the show notes. I think it was titled Trails to Daybreak Proves That Games Can Be Normal About Trans People. It goes over some of the issues with queer representation in the series, but also talks to some of the folks who were involved in localization for, not anymore, because now I think Nice has moved localization in-house, but contract workers did localization for a really long time, and some of them about how they also think there's been a shift in the way some of the Falcon people are thinking about queer characters and queer representation, which I think is an interesting read. That doesn't devalidate all the criticisms of earlier stuff. Those are, I mean, I have those criticisms too. I think they made some serious missteps, but I think it's interesting. And, fingers crossed that that's true. Now, the sexualization, that doesn't seem to, of girls, that's not necessarily seeming to change as much, but at least there's something.
It kind of swings back and forth. Like, I found the early Cold Steel games especially swung a little hard in the horniness.
Yeah.
Fair. It's the school setting. They're like trying out the tropes. Some of them stuck around. Some of them didn't. I do appreciate that they're moving forwards with the representation stuff because that's the thing that always gets me with Japanese games. Usually the response to poor representation of queer people or trans people or anyone who's not standard issue. It's just like, oh, it's like a cultural difference. It's like things are different in Japan. It's like, well, you're making entertainment for a global audience. So you need to take a global audience into mind.
And there are trans and queer people in Japan.
Exactly. It's a huge subset of the population. Like, cosplay. Like, come on. But it's keeping in mind that this is a series that has been releasing over the course of 20 years. Like, it's definitely moving in a better direction. And that's great to see because there are other series that have been going for just as long that have not done that. So, you might have some chafing along the way, but the ride gets smoother is kind of the energy.
And I will say, in terms of the issues regarding race that you brought up, Daybreak does make some big mistakes, but Daybreak also lets you fight white supremacists who are called white supremacists, and I think that's pretty neat.
I love that for us. Very
Love that for
vindicating
us.
gameplay.
So, I think that covers the cringe. To cringe or not to cringe. That's the second time I've said that. Yeah, I wonder why I'm in a Hamlet mood today. Anyway.
Hamlet and Star Wars, it's all over the place.
I think that covers the cringe, but again, as things come up, because they will, we'll point them out when when we feel a certain type of way about something that happens. We're not just going to skip over that and pretend it didn't happen. But we're also not going to make the whole episode, unless something really dramatic comes up, where these are long chapters. We can't spend the entire episode talking about the one homophobic joke. But we'll try to balance it so that we talk about it when it needs to be talked about, and we don't brush it under the rug. But we also experience the highs and lows.
Yeah, rest assured, this is mostly a love-in for this franchise, but
Oh, yeah.
when you love someone, you can love them warts and all, but you still have to acknowledge that the warts are there. So
Exactly.
we'll mention stuff, but it comes from a place of love and care and wanting them to be better, and they're already proving that they are doing that. So just highlighting the missteps will make it much more satisfying to highlight the successes.
Exactly.
Well, I guess the last thing I can think of to discuss is kind of how are we going to do this? Like, what's this podcast going to look like from the next episode onwards, Lex?
Well, we're going to do a live reenactment of every single line of dialogue, as well as every single line of flavor text.
Wow.
I've been taking vocal coaching for the last 2 years to make sure that I have enough range, so I hope that you can keep up with me. And this is going to take about 100 hours to listen to just to cover the first game, so buckle up. And no, of course, that's not what's happening. What we are planning to do is to play this game chapter by chapter and do an episode of the podcast probably for each chapter, but some of these chapters get pretty hefty, so it's always possible that we'll break a chapter up into 2 if we feel that it's going to take way too long to get through a chapter, and either that we can't possibly cover it in an episode, or it's going to take way too long, or just so much happens that we're like, I'm sorry, we just need to talk about this right now. It has been a few years since I played these games, and it's Matt's first time playing, and I had COVID the first time I played them, so I did have some brain fog, so
we'll see how much
there's
is
some things
true,
where I go, the fuck? We'll see how that goes. And yeah, the plan is to have each episode cover a chapter, or half the chapter. We'll give you a heads up as to what it's going to be. We're going to cover the events of that chapter, so if you're just here to listen and not actually haven't played the games and aren't playing along, you'll probably be able to follow sort of what happens if you're playing along with us, and you'll know exactly what we're talking about. And if you played it in the past and aren't replaying, then we're going to test your memory and see if we can point out something that you forgot about.
Each episode, I think, we'll try and sort of announce what chapter or portion of a chapter we're going to be covering in the next episode upcoming. And just to be clear, because the naming of this series does make it difficult, when we say a chapter, we're not talking about Trails in the Sky first chapter, the game.
No.
We're talking about Trails in the Sky first chapter, the first chapter.
Or a prologue.
Within the game. So for Trails in the Sky first chapter, how many chapters did it have? The answer is 5. So there is a prologue followed by 4 chapters. Scuttlebutt on the internet says that the prologue is longer than some of the chapters themselves. So we're going to get to a stopping point within the prologue of Lex.
The characters are going to gather for dinner after a day of exciting events that you'll find out about, and then go to bed. And then the next day is going to be covered on the next episode. That's going to be your stopping point.
So the first run of the prologue up to when you go to bed, and we'll announce more about what comes after that when the time comes, so that you can be just as mystified about what's coming up as me. I'm so excited to learn more about this game. Now, for availability of Trails in the Sky for folks to play along, what are the options we have on the table?
So the most accessible way to play it right now is on Steam. If you have a PC or a way to play PC games, it's also great on Steam Deck. If you have a Steam Deck or another kind of PC handheld, that's probably the best way to play it. Now, it is on PSP. The first game, Trails of the Sky First Chapter, all chapters of First Chapter, is on PSP. There are a few differences in localization, because when it was then ported to Steam, the localization team did another pass at it. It was mostly for consistency of terminology, I think. It wasn't one of those situations where this guy are sick comes along and then Final Fantasy VII gets redone to have correct grammar but less memeability. The next 2 Sky games are not on PSP in English, so if you have a way to get the Japanese version with the English text, then power to you, but there's no English version of Trails of the Sky second chapter or the third, because the naming scheme changes in that point in Sky. There's no official English way to play those on PSP. I also know that some people have been able to play it on Vita. I think that's also a fan translation, and I haven't done it, so I don't know the details, but I know there was an upgraded version with upgraded art that I like less, but some people like, that has Japanese voice acting as well. There's a fan translation of that, but the plot events are the same, so if that's the version you have or that you want to play, it's still going to follow the same story. It's not going to, I think, mostly the same script. I don't think there's any added side quests or anything like that.
It's interesting, the art. They've redrawn a lot of the portraits and stuff of characters to kind of be more in line with the shift in style to the later games, because the anime energy did kind of change a bit from way back in Trails in the Sky to now in Cold Steel and Daybreak. But it's kind of an awkward middle child. It's not quite either one, but you get kind of the energy. I believe that version's called First Chapter Evolution.
Yes.
On the Vita. For me, I initially tried to start playing it on my little PSP Go, but she's having some battery life issues. I will instead be playing the PC version. For me, being a Mac person, there is a way to use the version from GOG.com, Good Old Games, and make it play nice in Mac. So that option is out there. That's what I'm going to be using. It lets me play on my laptop, it lets me play with a controller, and it has the much beloved turbo feature, which speeds up the game. Because one thing to keep in mind with all of the Trails games to this day is that they are very slow. It seems to be an artifact of like being on the PS3 and those earlier systems where everything just moved a bit slower, and they kind of kept that as their statement piece,
I guess.
when I really wish they wouldn't.
But turbo mode is beautiful, and every game should have it.
Yes, the PC versions, both Steam and GOG, have turbo, so you can speed things up and just kind of zoop through the game when you need to. I will say I've played a little bit on my controller on my laptop, and being able to just hold down the right trigger and turbo is amazing. So I'll be playing on there, which is that upgraded translation. Got some English voice acting, little like barks and shouts that they do, which interestingly is the same cast as has just been confirmed for the remake, Trails in the Sky, the first, because we got another new name. I bet you this time they'll do the first, the second, and third chapter.
Exactly. It's all coming full circle. No, it's exciting that they've got basically the same cast, with the exception of Troy Baker as Olivier in the original Sky games, just as Combat Barks. Was replaced by Matt Mercer, but that is consistent with casting.
With much love, that's the same guy, basically.
With much love. Yeah, Matt Mercer does a great job of that voice.
He's very good at it. Really showing his range lately. I was just playing like a pirate, like a pirate, like a dragon pirate yakuza in Hawaii.
Like a pirate is so much better.
Just really condense it down. He's like a pirate, but he plays the main character Goro Majima. In that, he had like little bit parts in the earlier Like a Dragon games. Who's a very kooky kind of character. So seeing that, and then sweet Olivier, the horny boy. The man's got range.
He's great. No shade based on the Troy Baker joke. Please don't listen, even though you're not listening. Please don't hate us, even though you're not listening. Matt,
Thank you for coming to our podcast. Please don't listen.
Clearly, I've been podcasting. Clearly this has been going on a little while, and it's almost okay. I was gonna say it's late here, but it's 8:30 p.m. I have no excuse. It's 8:30 in the evening. It's not late. I'm just here.
These games just make you loopy.
The last version of Sky that we should bring up is the version that doesn't exist for consumption yet. That's the remake that's coming out in the fall. I'm sure we'll talk about it in some capacity, but we are playing the original little sprites on the little screen.
For now, I think it'll be really interesting to get the OG and see what that's like, and then in a few months' time, compare it to the shiny upres version, which does look gorgeous. I'm very excited to play it.
It does look gorgeous. Yeah, and the combat looks really exciting.
The great thing about this series is the story is going on forever, but the combat gets revamped almost every time. They're always seeking to improve it and adapt it. So there's pretty much a flavor of RPG combat for everyone in this series, and if one of them gets you, you suck it into the rest. I'm so sorry. That's your life now. And that's our life now.
That's your life.
So for now, I think that'll do us for our brief introduction to the world of Zemuria, the series of Trails, Kiseki, and we will see you on our next big episode to cover the first part of the first chapter that is the prologue of the game that is called the first chapter, which is fully called The Legend of Heroes, Trails in the Sky, first chapter.
Until then, keep on bracing, everybody.
Blaze them trails. And as we always say at the end of our podcast, please don't listen.
You're never going to let me live that down, are you?
Oh, it's too good.